Anna Bennett, and I'm the Director of Pathways and Academic Learning Support at the University of Newcastle in New South Wales. My experience with evaluation is closely tied with my experience in programs that are focused on pathways into and through higher education, and the important work of providing access but also support to ensure a great experience for students and to ensure that we can be working to continuously improve that experience and the outcomes for all participants and students in initiatives into and through higher education. So what I'd like to, I guess, highlight here is that among other projects, in 2015, I led the Equity Initiatives Framework, or the EIF, as I refer to it, and that guides most unis through their evaluation and planning of programs. And what I'd really like to highlight, and I do this through that work in the EIF, along with my co-investigators, leading researchers, Professor Jeff Whitty, Penny Jane Burke, Jenny Gore, Richard James, Andrew Harvey, Matt Brett, and Ryan Naylor. And many of those had also initiated the first comprehensive study about these equity initiatives and access initiatives in Australia, known as the Critical Interventions Framework. And so what we did was we really wanted to look at what valued to the participants, what was important to them. And so I've subsequently published a journal article about this in Educational Research and Evaluation to focus on the findings from that study, also other research, and to discuss some overarching principles that are really important and some approaches to methodology and methods when evaluating, and then the importance of feeding that back into provision. So some of those higher level, I guess, overarching principles are around ensuring that provision, providing a program, and evaluation are always interconnected, that we're thinking about this in the same way so that they can feed into one another to ensure things like our initiatives are providing experiences and opportunities for all of the participants, all of the people, students in our programs, in ways that matter to them. So valuing difference and valuing diversity. So not going with a one size fits all, not a one size fits all in terms of education, but also in terms of the way that we think about a program or that we evaluate it. So that's what I call a what matters approach in that paper. And so evaluation is something that is about valuation, valuing. So not only, and especially not only in economic terms, which is so often the case in these days, because education is a relational dynamic. And so to learn, we need to be recognising that education is relationally dynamic. We have a relationship between a student or a participant in a program or an activity, and also the practitioner, educator in that activity. As part of the EIF study, the Equity Initiatives Framework study that I led in 2015 and subsequently have published about in 2018, I developed a What Matters guide for practitioners, educators, for myself to go back and remember to follow. And this really involves the overarching principles and approaches that can help us, to help guide us. It's not meant to be, again, not a one size fits all approach, because I have said in the article that a one size approach to education is something that we know we shouldn't be applying, that we really need to value difference and diversity and engage with that continuously through the provision and the evaluation of an activity or a program. And so a What Matters guide is something that's really important to follow in that flexible way. So when we look at the impact of a program, we're wanting to see how it's illuminated by participants, by the students, by the staff, by the community stakeholders, and to do this over time, iteratively. So this requires a holistic methodological approach to evaluation, drawing on mixed methods, such as interviews, focus groups, quantitative surveys, and quantitative data, but not limited to those. So the more, the merrier, in a sense. So the more tools that you can gain an understanding of what might be working for individuals, but also to provide the information, the insights about gaps, which qualitative tools can really help, that is something that is really important. This will provide a full picture of participants' experiences and learnings. And this can prevent cohorts from being misrecognised or from being treated through a one-size-fits-all approach. We want to make sure that we're engaging equitably and with social justice principles through our activities and our programs. And so initiatives should be considered works in progress, which are continuously redeveloped in response to findings all along the way, all through the student journey. And so I have an illustration provided on the screen, which talks about this provision evaluation approach, it being an ongoing, iterative and creative process. And this prevents an overly linear form of program logic from developing. We want to make sure that we're not just seeing a one-way mapping of aims and activities to outcomes. This risks preventing important learnings from the outcomes we find. Mapping outcomes back to enable recognition of how aims and activities work in practice for a diversity of participants is what's important. We need to map our activity or our program. So we start with mapping out the aims, activities and outcomes. And then when engaging in the ongoing evaluation, focus on the importance of capturing all the group's goals, experiences, relationships with the practitioners, with educators and peers especially, and outcomes. You can also include data that captures the utility of learning for other purposes. For example, other outcomes that lead into other types of vocational training, employment, etc. So it's able to understand the full breadth of what learning can provide for people. Identify demand and reach according to both the geographical and the demographic characteristics of students. And you can do that through a quick survey at the beginning of an interview, for example, or you can put it at the beginning of a survey, whichever way you're wanting to do it. You don't always need to stick to the same kinds of approaches, and that's the beauty of mixed methods, is to be able to calibrate and to inquire creatively with your participants. And don't be afraid of exploring complexity, because education is a complex realm. It is nested within broader socioeconomic and socio-cultural dynamics. Things change, and as we know, they change at a fast pace as time goes on. So we need to be able to understand where an initiative sits within the more complex and wider international, national contexts around the education or the activity. Explore ways to understand experiences and what's left out, and then feed this approach back into the program design, the planning, your mapping, the program logic, and then in terms of reporting and review. Sharing is very important along the way. So holding some sessions for professional development with staff, talking through all of these really fascinating elements of providing a program and also evaluating it. So in summary, the main thing is to be holistic in your approach. and approach your program, your initiative in ways that is creative, that is able to inspire the students. And as I said, go about it with a lifelong learning disposition that we always strive and work to embed in our programs and initiatives for our students.